Welcome to the story. My husband was flying to London for a 10-day business trip. I saw him off myself, right up to the security gate. The next morning, I got a call from the police. They had found him and a woman, both naked and dead, in the bathtub of a suburban mansion. When I arrived and saw the woman's face, a wave of disbelief and horror washed over me. It was 6 a.m., and New York City was still drowsy under a thin veil of mist. The only sound was the rhythmic hiss of street sweepers cleaning the asphalt, a monotonous drone that cut to the soul. I parked in front of the JFK terminal, the chill from the massive air conditioning system inside making me shiver as it wafted out. Or maybe the cold came from a vague premonition creeping into my mind. Getting out of the car, I saw my husband, David, his tall, sturdy frame impeccable in a crisp charcoal suit. He had always been my rock, the one thing that made me feel safe after long, stressful hours working with cold bodies. I hurried over to the trunk to help him pull out his large suitcase. My fingers accidentally brushed against his sleeve and froze. The second cuff button on his suit jacket was loose, dangling by a single thread, a stark contrast to his usual meticulous appearance. A professional habit, born from years as a medical examiner noticing the smallest details, kicked in. I frowned. "Wait a second, honey. That button is about to fall off. Let me grab my sewing kit from my purse and fix it. It wouldn't look good to meet important partners like that." David glanced down, then gently pushed my hand away with a soft laugh. His voice was warm and deep, but there was an unusual urgency to it. "Don't worry about it, Eve. If we stop for that now, I'll miss check-in. I'll have the hotel staff take care of it when I get there. You worry too much." He leaned down and gave me a quick, gentle kiss on the forehead. His familiar scent of cedarwood cologne, mixed with a faint trace of tobacco, filled my senses. It was the scent of my husband, the scent of the security I had cherished for 7 years. But today, it felt distant, evasive. I watched him pull his suitcase toward the VIP security lane. The very subtle limp in his walk, a permanent reminder of the motorcycle accident years ago when he'd thrown himself in front of me, made my heart ache. Just as he was about to disappear behind the automatic glass doors, David suddenly stopped. He turned, looked back at me, and waved forcefully. His smile was bright under the airport's pale yellow lights, but his eyes held a profound sorrow, as if he were trying to commit my face to memory one last time. I drove back into the city as the morning rush hour began. The cacophony of car horns pulled me from my thoughts about my husband's strange gaze. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text. I glanced at the screen. A notification from our bank. A massive sum of money had just been transferred into our joint account. The number had so many zeros I had to pull over to the side of the road to read it clearly. The memo for the transfer contained just 2 words: contingency fund. A chill ran down my spine, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead, despite the car's AC blasting at full power. In the world of high-stakes business, there are unwritten, often terrifying, rules. One of them is to liquidate assets or set up a contingency fund for your family right before a high-risk deal or when you're about to face legal trouble. Why contingency fund and not living expenses or investment, as he usually wrote? Those 2 words sat on my phone screen like a final testament, a preparation for the worst-case scenario he didn't dare say aloud. I tried to calm myself, telling myself he was just being cautious on a long trip, but a wife's intuition and the instincts of someone who deals with death for a living screamed that something was wrong. That night, after a draining day wrestling with case files and a gnawing anxiety, I had just drifted off when the phone rang. A midnight call for a medical examiner is never a good sign. It usually means an unnatural death or a bloody crime scene. I fumbled for the phone. The caller ID showed it was my boss, the chief of the homicide division. "Hello, this is Dr. Reed." My voice was hoarse with sleep and a rising fear in my throat. The other end was silent for a few seconds, just a heavy sigh and the distant wail of a siren. My boss's voice, usually sharp and authoritative, was hesitant, full of an uncomfortable sympathy. "Evelyn, I need you to stay calm. A patrol unit just called in. They found your husband." I shot up in bed, my heart pounding against my ribs. "Found him? What do you mean? He's in London. What are you talking about?" He was found in a mansion in Westchester. My boss's voice dropped, each word a hammer blow to my eardrums. You need to prepare yourself. The scene is complicated. He's deceased. The phone slipped from my hand, landing silently on the mattress. All sound seemed to be sucked into a black hole. It couldn't be. This morning, he was smiling at me. The button on his sleeve was still loose. I sat frozen in the darkness, a bone-deep chill enveloping me. But I knew I couldn't fall apart. Not now. I was his wife, but I was also a medical examiner. I had to go there. I had to see him, even if it was for the last time. I drove like a madwoman through the night, my bare foot pressing the accelerator to the floor, the engine roaring as it tore through the quiet suburbs. The mansion stood isolated in the middle of an overgrown garden. The flashing red and blue lights of police cars swept across the trees, casting grotesque, dancing shapes on the moss-covered walls. When I got out of the car, my legs were shaking so badly I almost collapsed, but my professional training forced me to stand tall. The yellow police tape fluttered in the night wind, a flimsy barrier between the world of the living and the land of the dead inside. My colleagues saw me, their gazes either averting mine or fixed on the ground. No one dared to look me in the eye. A young officer, Miller, who usually joked around with me, stepped forward hesitantly. "Dr. Reed, maybe you shouldn't go in. Let us finish processing the scene, and you can make the identification later. It's not a pretty sight." I pushed his arm aside, my voice so cold it sounded foreign even to me. "Move. I'm the medical examiner, and I'm the victim's next of kin. I have a right to know." I stepped under the yellow tape. The first thing that hit me wasn't the familiar smell of death, but the overpowering stench of expensive liquor, cloyingly sweet perfume, and the acrid smoke of some recently burned narcotic. The large living room was a disaster, the aftermath of a wild party. Empty liquor bottles littered the floor, and clothes were strewn over plush red velvet sofas. But none of it held my attention. I walked straight toward the bathroom, where the flashes of the forensics team's cameras were going off incessantly. In the enormous white porcelain jacuzzi tub, my husband, David, was sitting with his head leaning back against the rim, his eyes closed as if he were asleep. He was completely naked. His skin was a grotesque, cherry-pink color, a telltale sign of carbon monoxide poisoning or cyanide. But the thing that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces wasn't his death. It was the woman slumped beside him, her long, wet hair obscuring half her face. Her bare arm was draped over my husband's neck. Their bodies were entwined in a position so naked and carnal it would make anyone blush and turn away. I froze as the lead investigator gently lifted her hair to take a photograph. The face was familiar. It was Chloe, my distant cousin whom I had always loved and trusted. Chloe was only 22, a senior in college. She often came over for dinner, calling David Uncle David in her sweet voice. A wave of nausea rose from my stomach. I had to cover my mouth to keep from vomiting right there. In the eyes of my colleagues, this was clearly a case of a drug-fueled orgy gone wrong, an overdose during a rendezvous, a humiliating end for a successful businessman. I could hear them whispering behind me, murmuring about depravity, infidelity, and the poor, cuckolded wife. But as the initial shock and pain subsided, my professional instincts rose, sharp and merciless. I pulled on a pair of latex gloves, took a deep breath to suppress my emotions, and approached my husband's body. I didn't look at his face, nor at the naked body that screamed of betrayal. I focused on the biological signs. I gently lifted his shoulders, examining his back and buttocks. Under the bright forensic light, I saw the deep purple-red stains of livor mortis fixed in a large patch. According to the laws of gravity, if a person dies in a seated position in a bathtub, the blood will pool in the lowest parts of the body, the buttocks, thighs, and calves forming the stains there. But on my husband's body, the lividity was fully present on his back and the back of his arms. This proved he had been dead in a supine position, lying on his back for at least 4 hours before being moved and placed in this sitting position. I turned to my boss, my eyes dry and steely. "This is a staged scene. He didn't die in this tub. He died lying flat on his back on a hard surface. Someone moved him here afterward and arranged him like this." The room fell silent. Even the camera shutters stopped. My declaration was like a bucket of cold water on their prejudiced assumptions. The dead don't lie. The patterns of livor mortis were the most honest witnesses, exposing the killer's clumsy charade. My husband didn't die in a sordid accident. He was murdered, and his reputation was being desecrated even after his last breath. The screech of tires outside the mansion's gate was followed by the sharp, rapid click-clack of high heels on the pavement, a sound that hammered against my chest. Before I could turn, a dark figure rushed in, bringing a cold draft and the overpowering scent of oud perfume. Smack! A stinging slap landed on my left cheek, so hard my head spun. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. I staggered back, clutching my burning face, and looked up at the woman who had struck me. It was Eleanor, my mother-in-law. Her elegant black silk dress was immaculate, but her face was twisted in fury. Standing just behind her was Marcus, my brother-in-law, who was adjusting his gold-rimmed glasses with an inscrutable expression. "You curse! Look what you've done!" Eleanor shrieked, her trembling finger pointed at my face. "I said from the beginning that you were bad luck, that you'd bring ruin to this family. And now look! He's dead, naked in a bathtub with some whore. Do you have any idea the shame you've brought upon our name?" I swallowed the salty taste of blood, trying to keep my voice steady. "Eleanor, I know you're in pain, but there's more to this. The livor mortis on David's body doesn't match the position he was found in. I suspect this scene was staged. We need to—" "Shut up!" Eleanor screamed, cutting me off. Her eyes held no pity, only disgust and calculation. "What are you going to do, cut him open? You want the whole world to see my son's mutilated body and laugh at this family? You want the company's stock to plummet tomorrow?" At that moment, Marcus slowly stepped forward. He placed a calming hand on his mother's shoulder, then turned to me. His eyes glinted coldly behind his glasses. He pulled a thick stack of photos from his crocodile leather briefcase and threw them onto the glass table in front of my boss and the investigation team. The photos scattered, revealing images of David and Chloe entering a hotel, dining intimately, and even some blurry shots of them in a car. "Eve, I know you're in shock," Marcus said, his tone deceptively calm and reasonable, but every word was a knife. "But the truth is right there. David and Chloe have been seeing each other for over a year. We all knew. We just kept it from you to maintain peace in the family. Tonight, he secretly pushed back his flight to meet her here. Unfortunately, they used too many drugs and it led to an accident. This is a private family matter. We don't want to make it public." I stared at the photos. The angles, the lighting, everything was perfectly arranged to make the viewer believe they were having an affair. But I knew David, and I knew Chloe even better. She had a boyfriend back home. She respected David like a father. This was a blatant fabrication. "Impossible!" I gasped, lunging toward the lead investigator. "Detective, look closely. The lividity is on his back. He died lying down. These photos are manipulated. They're staged. We have to perform an autopsy. We must!" The detective looked at me with pity, then glanced at Marcus. Marcus said nothing. He simply took out his phone, dialed a number, and put it on speaker. A powerful voice echoed from the other end, so authoritative it made every officer in the room stand a little straighter. It was the voice of a high-ranking official at the district attorney's office, a family friend the Reeds often mentioned at parties. "Regarding the incident at the Westchester mansion, the family wishes for the body not to be desecrated for personal reasons. See to it that this is resolved quickly. Release the body to the family for the funeral arrangements. And keep the press from getting wind of this. It could damage the reputation of one of this state's major corporations." The call ended. The detective sighed and turned to me, his eyes full of helplessness. "I'm sorry, Dr. Reed. We have to release the body. The family has signed a waiver refusing an autopsy." I stood, rooted to the spot, watching as the men from the private mortuary, hired by Marcus, began to carry my husband's body away. They zipped him into a cold, black body bag. The sound of the zipper tore through my soul. I realized I was alone in this fight. They didn't care how David had died. They only cared about their reputation, about the numbers on the stock market. In their eyes, David's life was just an incident, a PR crisis to be managed as quickly as possible. I watched Marcus directing the men. the Patek Philippe on his wrist gleaming under the forensic lights. He turned and looked at me, a faint, challenging smirk on his lips. His eyes seemed to say, "You've lost." The high-end private funeral home was nestled in a pine forest on the outskirts of the city. The Reed family had booked the entire facility for a swift, private service and cremation. There were no somber hymns, no long lines of mourners, only a chilling silence that hung over the expensive mahogany casket in the center of the cold hall. Eleanor sat in the front row, her fingers gliding over prayer beads, her eyes closed. I couldn't tell if she was praying for her son's soul or calculating how she would address the shareholders tomorrow. I stood in a corner, observing everything. Marcus was outside on the veranda, smoking and talking to his lawyer on the phone about inheritance and the transfer of power. The morticians, having finished preparing David's body, had stepped out for a break. This was my only chance. If that casket lid closed for good, the truth about his death would be buried forever. Taking a deep breath to calm my racing heart, I tiptoed toward the casket. David lay there, his face carefully made up to hide the unnatural pinkish hue of his skin, his eyes closed as if in a deep sleep. I looked at him, tears welling up, but I quickly wiped them away. This was no time for weakness. From the sleeve of my oversized blazer, I pulled out a small scalpel, an indispensable tool from my field kit. My left hand gently lifted his head, while my right expertly slid the blade into the thick hair at the nape of his neck. Slice. A small lock of hair, root and all, was neatly cut. I quickly placed it in a tiny Ziploc bag hidden in my palm. Hair retains a history of drug use. It would tell me what he was poisoned with. Next, his fingernails. I took his cold, stiff hand, my heart aching. "I'm sorry, David," I thought, then used a small, specialized nail clipper to take a sample from his index finger. The small click echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. I flinched, glancing toward the door, but Marcus was still outside, his back to me, deep in his phone conversation. Trembling, I collected the nail clipping and packaged it carefully. But my medical examiner's intuition told me something was still missing. The abnormal lividity, the cherry-pink skin, I needed to find the entry point of the poison. I switched on a tiny medical penlight and scanned his body, from his wrists and elbows to the spaces between his toes. No needle marks. The killer was a professional, or they had extensive medical knowledge. The beam of light passed over his neck, and I paused. I gently tilted his head and pulled back his left ear. The skin behind the ear, right over the mastoid bone, is thin with few nerve endings. There, under the bright white LED, was a minuscule red dot, so small that a casual observer would dismiss it as a mosquito bite or an inflamed pore, but to me, it was the gateway of death. Around the dot was a tiny subcutaneous bruise, a sign of bleeding from an external force while the heart was still beating. I quickly took a close-up photo of the injection site with my phone, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Just then, the sound of leather shoes on the marble floor came from the doorway. "What are you doing?" Marcus's cold voice was right behind me. I jumped, quickly shoving my phone and the sample bags deep into my bra, the safest place right now. I turned, forcing a look of utter grief, my eyes brimming with tears, my hand still clutching David's cold one. I just wanted to straighten his tie one last time," I sobbed, my voice choked. "It's crooked. He always liked to be so neat." Marcus stared at me, his eyes trying to bore into my soul. He walked closer, glanced at David's collar, then back at me. Suspicion was plain in his eyes, but perhaps my devastated appearance was convincing enough. He grunted and waved a dismissive hand. "If you're done, get out. It's time for the service. Don't hold things up." I lowered my head and shuffled out, my hand pressed against my chest. There, next to my frantically beating heart, lay the only evidence that could clear my husband's name. The heavy door of the crematorium swung open, releasing a blast of heat that seemed to warp the air. I stood behind the thick, heat-resistant glass, watching the wooden casket slide inside. In that moment, it felt as if my own soul was being pushed into those ravenous flames. Eleanor turned away, dabbing a handkerchief at the corner of her eye. Whether her tears were real or part of the act, I couldn't tell. Marcus stood with his arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the furnace door, his focus more like someone watching the destruction of evidence than bidding farewell to his own brother. The roar of the burners intensified as the flames erupted, engulfing the casket. I bit my lip until it bled to keep from screaming. I knew that fire wasn't just incinerating my husband's body, it was obliterating the most crucial macroscopic evidence. There would be no second chance to examine the livor mortis. No one would ever see the unnatural pink skin or measure the carbon monoxide levels in his blood. It would all become ash, silent and meaningless. But they were wrong. They thought the fire could destroy everything. They didn't know that I, a medical examiner, had already secured the smallest, most silent, but most damning witnesses. The lock of hair and the nail clipping in my bra felt warm against my skin, as if they were transferring some unseen strength to me. "Eve!" Marcus's voice beside me made me jump. He had moved so close I could smell the stale cigarette smoke on his suit. "He's at peace now," Marcus said, his eyes still on the flames. "You should let it go, too. Don't try to dig anything up. The dead are dead. Making a fuss will only cause more pain for the living and tarnish his reputation. You understand what I mean, don't you?" His words were phrased as advice, but they were a clear threat. He was warning me. He was afraid of what I might find. His suspicion from the viewing room hadn't faded. I knew that from this moment on, my every move would be under his watch. I turned to face him, forcing my breathing to steady, my expression to become as vacant and resigned as possible. "I understand, Marcus. It's just hard to accept." He was gone so suddenly. Marcus looked me over, his gaze lingering on my chest for a moment too long, sending a chill down my spine. I instinctively hunched my shoulders, the natural reaction of a grieving, vulnerable woman. He smirked, patting my shoulder. The gesture felt as heavy as a shackle. "It's good that you understand. The family won't let you suffer. Now that David's gone, Mother and I will make sure his assets provide you with a comfortable life, as long as you behave." The word behave was uttered so lightly, yet it filled me with disgust. He saw me as a pet, one that would be obedient as long as it was fed. He had no idea that this pet held the key to unlocking the gates of hell he was trying so desperately to keep shut. As the car drove me away from the funeral home, I looked through the rear window. The crematorium's chimney was spewing black smoke into the gray sky. I placed a hand over my heart and whispered a promise to the departed. "Rest now, David. I'll take it from here. I will make the one who turned you to ash pay with his life." A sudden downpour washed over the city at midnight, cleansing the day's grime but unable to wash away the haunting images in my mind. I pulled into a small, dark alley behind a row of high-rises, the location of the private lab belonging to Dr. Peterson, my old professor who had guided me through my first years as a medical examiner. I couldn't risk taking these samples to the official county lab. Marcus had eyes and ears everywhere, and an official report could disappear before it ever reached my hands. Dr. Peterson greeted me with a worried expression. He didn't ask many questions, just silently took the tiny bags from my hand. He understood the unspoken rules of our profession. When a medical examiner shows up at your back door in the middle of the night, it means justice is being gagged. "I need you to run a gas chromatography mass spectrometry," I said, my voice trembling from the cold and anticipation. "I suspect poisoning by a non-depolarizing muscle relaxant." Dr. Peterson nodded, put on his glasses, and got to work. The whir of the centrifuge and the clinking of glassware filled the chemical-scented room, a grim soundtrack to my wait. I sat huddled on a plastic chair, my eyes glued to the computer screen where green and red data streams danced. Every second felt like an eternity. 2 hours later, the printer whirred to life, spitting out a single sheet of paper. "Doctor." Peterson picked it up, squinted through his bifocals, and his face changed. He looked at me, his eyes filled with shock and sympathy. "Evelyn, look at this." I took the paper. The numbers and chemical graphs were undeniable. In David's hair and nails, the concentration of succinylcholine was dozens of times higher than any therapeutic dose. Succinylcholine. To a layperson, it was just a medical term. To someone in my field, it was the devil's poison. It's a drug used in anesthesia to facilitate intubation, causing rapid muscle relaxation. But injected in a large dose into a conscious person, it becomes one of the cruelest murder weapons imaginable. The victim is fully paralyzed in under a minute. Arms, legs, facial muscles, everything becomes unresponsive. They can't move, can't scream for help. But the most horrific part is that the drug doesn't affect the brain or the senses. The victim remains completely aware, able to hear, see, and feel everything happening around them. Tears blurred the report in my hands. I pictured the scene: David, injected behind the ear, feeling his body turn to lead. He saw the killer, perhaps his own brother, staging the scene, stripping him, dragging his cousin's body next to his. He wanted to scream, to fight back, but his throat was locked. His chest couldn't expand to draw a breath. He had died of asphyxiation, not from drowning or carbon monoxide. He died slowly, in the absolute terror of being buried alive inside his own body. He had been forced to witness the entire shameful charade they created for him before darkness finally fell. "Whoever did this has extensive medical knowledge and is utterly ruthless," Dr. Peterson said gravely. "This drug metabolizes incredibly fast in the bloodstream. If you had taken a blood sample 24 hours later, or after the cremation, you would have found nothing. It's a good thing you got the nail and hair samples, where it lingers longer." I clutched the report, the thin paper feeling as heavy as lead. This wasn't an accident, nor a crime of passion. This was a meticulously planned, cold-blooded execution. I wiped my tears, folded the paper, and tucked it away. My grief was now forged into a burning fire of vengeance. I would not let him die in vain. I would find the person who held that syringe, the person who stood by and watched him die in utter despair. The previous night's rain had stopped, leaving the city skyline a dreary, somber gray that matched my mood. I was sitting in a small cafe tucked away in a quiet alley, stirring a long melted iced coffee. Across from me was Chris, an old high school friend who was now a senior technician for the security systems at JFK. Getting him to meet me at this hour had required calling in old favors and pleading as a newly widowed wife. Chris glanced around nervously before sliding a laptop toward me. He lowered his voice. "Look fast and delete everything when you're done," he whispered. "I'm sticking my neck out for you on this. There's an order from on high to lock down all information related to David's case. Anyone who touches it gets fired. No questions asked." I nodded, my trembling hand plugging a flash drive into the laptop. The screen filled with video files, time-stamped. I took a deep breath and clicked on the file covering the 6 to 7 a.m. window from that day. The high-resolution footage from the security camera appeared, showing the bustling International Departures Hall. I fast-forwarded to the moment I said goodbye to David at the security checkpoint. On the screen, I saw myself lingering, watching my husband's back as he pulled his sleek, silver suitcase. He walked decisively, heading straight for the priority lane for business-class passengers. At first glance, everything seemed perfectly normal, matching my memory of that fateful morning. But my intuition screamed that something was wrong. Some tiny detail was crying out for my attention. I replayed the clip of him going through the security scanner over and over. He took off his jacket, belt, and watch, placing them in the plastic tray. "Wait." I paused the video and zoomed in on the man's hands. He was taking the watch off his right wrist. My heart skipped a beat. David was left-handed. In 7 years of marriage, I had never once seen him wear his watch on his right wrist. He always wore it on his left, leaving his dominant hand free for writing and signing documents. I remembered that morning when I had offered to fix his cuff button. His left arm had been hanging naturally at his side, his dark brown leather-strapped watch sitting securely on his left wrist. So why, just 15 minutes after leaving my sight, was the watch on his right? I continued playing the video. The man passed through the metal detector, put his jacket back on, fastened the watch to his right wrist, and continued on, pulling the suitcase. He walked quickly, blending into the crowd rushing toward their gates. A casual observer would see no difference: the same height, hairstyle, and suit. But that one detail, the watch, was a small crack that shattered the perfect picture. "Chris," I said, my voice hoarse, "can you find another angle? One with a clearer view of his face? Or maybe from behind as he enters the jet bridge?" Chris sighed, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "I'll try, but camera coverage is limited in that area." Here we go. Camera 42, the ramp to the departure gate. A new video appeared. The man was on a moving walkway, his head down, looking at his phone. A baseball cap was pulled low, obscuring most of his face, but his gait only amplified my suspicion. My chest tightened. A painful sense of betrayal washed over me. The man pulling that suitcase, the one who had casually boarded a flight to London to create the perfect alibi, was not my husband. I took the flash drive home, locked myself in my study, and began an analysis I never imagined I would perform on my own husband. On my large monitor, I opened a forensic gait analysis program, a specialized tool we use to identify criminals through their unique biomechanics. The human body is a biological machine that remembers every injury, and every step carries the imprint of the past. I loaded the airport video into the software, setting virtual skeletal markers on the man's body. Green lines connected his hips, knees, and ankles, graphing his movement as a wave pattern. I held my breath. David had been in a serious motorcycle accident in college. He'd swerved to shield me from a wrong-way driver. The crash had partially torn his left ACL. Despite surgery and extensive physical therapy, his body had developed a natural compensation mechanism. When he walked quickly or was tired, his left foot would touch the ground a fraction of a second faster than his right, and he would put less pressure on it. The analysis results appeared on the screen, cold and impersonal. The gait graph of the man in the video showed almost perfect balance. The weight distribution between his legs was 50/50. His stride length was perfectly even. He walked with a strong, steady pace, with no sign of a limp or weight compensation. I dug through an old hard drive and found a family video from last year of David playing with our nephews in the park. I fed it into the program for comparison. The result was two completely different graphs. David's graph showed a characteristic deviation. His left foot bore weight for 0.03 seconds less than his right. That tiny fraction of a second, imperceptible to the naked eye, was an undeniable truth the machine could see. I dropped my head onto the desk, hot tears streaming down my face. The truth was laid bare. The man at the airport was a professional body double. He had a similar height and build, and was equipped with identical clothes, luggage, and documents. He had taken my husband's place after the security checkpoint, leaving David behind to a fate I couldn't bear to imagine. So where was my husband during that time? He couldn't have just vanished from the airport. If he went into the VIP lounge, but the body double was the one who came out, then the switch must have happened inside the business class lounge itself. It was a discreet area with few people and, for privacy reasons, no internal cameras. A horrifying scenario took shape in my mind. David walked into the lounge, perhaps to grab a coffee or check his email. He had no idea that in that quiet, luxurious space, a deadly trap had been set. The enemy wasn't waiting for him in London or at the mansion. They struck where he least expected it. 0.03 seconds. A blink of an eye, but it exposed an entire monstrous conspiracy. I wiped my tears, my gaze turning sharp and cold. I had to figure out how they got my husband out of the airport, right under the noses of hundreds of security personnel. I went back to the CCTV footage. This time, I ignored the departures gate and focused on the service exit of the VIP lounge, the one used by staff and for deliveries. If David didn't walk out the front, he must have been taken out the back. I strained my eyes, replaying the footage from 6:30 to 7:30 a.m. At 7:15, the service door opened. Two men in dark blue janitorial uniforms pushed out a large, composite linen cart, the kind used in five-star hotels to collect dirty tablecloths and bedding. The cart looked extremely heavy. Its wheels groaned under the weight as they rolled across the marble floor. The two men had to use considerable force to move it. My gut told me this was it. I zoomed in as much as possible. The image was grainy, but it was enough to see some unusual details. Both janitors wore face masks and had their hats pulled down low. The one at the back was heavyset, pushing with both hands on the cart's rim. For a brief moment, as he raised a hand to wipe sweat from his brow, his uniform sleeve slid up, revealing his left wrist. A flash of light reflected off something he was wearing. It was a rose gold metal watch. I held my breath, trying to enhance the image. Though I couldn't read the brand, The distinctive cushioned rectangular case and integrated bracelet were unmistakable. It was a Patek Philippe Nautilus, a luxury item worth a small fortune, something no ordinary janitor could afford unless he'd won the lottery or it was a fake. But I knew that watch. I had seen it dozens of times at family dinners, gleaming on the wrist of my respectable brother-in-law. Marcus had a passion for luxury watches, and that rose gold Nautilus was his pride and joy, something he often flaunted to business partners. The horrifying truth hit me like a physical blow. The man pushing the linen cart with my husband's body inside was his own brother. Marcus had done it himself. He had disguised himself as a janitor, snuck into the lounge, and worked with an accomplice to incapacitate or kill his own brother, then stuffed him into a laundry cart to be smuggled out like garbage. My chest felt like it would explode with rage. His own brother, his own blood. How could he be so cruel? The plan was meticulous. The body double flew to London to create an alibi for David, while Marcus handled the body at the airport to minimize risk. I took a screenshot of the moment the watch was visible and saved it to an encrypted folder. That Patek Philippe, once a symbol of Marcus's power and wealth, had just become an invisible handcuff, tightening around his wrist. He thought his plan was flawless, but his greed and vanity had left a fatal crack. After uncovering how the crime was committed at the airport, I turned my investigation to the second victim, Chloe. To the Reed family and the public, Chloe was a shameless homewrecker, a promiscuous girl who had seduced her uncle-in-law and died with him in a sordid tryst. But I didn't believe it. The Chloe I knew was a shy, sweet girl, deeply insecure about her family's poverty back home. Using my medical credentials, I logged into the interconnected healthcare database. It was a breach of professional ethics, but I had no other choice. I typed in Chloe's name and social security number. The search returned a long, shocking history of medical visits. In the past 2 years, Chloe had been admitted to the emergency room a total of 12 times at various hospitals and private clinics. The reasons were always vaguely recorded: household accident, fell downstairs, minor traffic collision. But when I opened the detailed reports and viewed the accompanying x-rays, the raw, painful truth emerged. First visit, fractured 6th and 7th ribs on the left side. Second visit, dislocated right shoulder, extensive bruising on her back. Third visit, concussion, a scalp laceration requiring 5 stitches. The most recent visit, 2 months ago, a grade 1 splenic laceration and a fractured fibula. These were not injuries from falling downstairs or being clumsy. With the trained eye of a medical examiner, I immediately recognized the classic signs of systematic domestic abuse or torture. The rib fractures were in different stages of healing, proving she had been beaten repeatedly over a long period. Some old fractures hadn't even fully healed before new ones were inflicted on top of them. I looked at an X-ray of her arm, where the ulna had a spiral fracture, a common injury when a victim raises their arm to block a blow from a bat or other blunt object. My heart ached for her. Chloe was not a pampered mistress living in luxury, as Marcus had painted her. She was a slave, a punching bag for someone to vent their rage on, and I had a sickening suspicion of who that someone was. Marcus was known for his violent and controlling tendencies, frequenting underground clubs where poor young women like Chloe were turned into playthings for the depraved elite. Chloe had fallen into his trap, been controlled and tortured by him. David and Chloe dying together wasn't an affair. It was my husband's desperate attempt to rescue his young cousin from a monster's clutches. He must have found out, tried to intervene, and his kindness got them both killed. Marcus murdered them both and staged the scene to turn the victims into villains, absolving himself of all sin. I dropped my head onto the keyboard, tears of pity and rage falling for the tragic fate of the young girl. Following an address I found in a series of fragmented, desperate text messages from Chloe's cloud backup, I made my way to a bar in a grimy, labyrinthine alley deep in the city's underbelly. A world away from the glamorous hotspots Marcus frequented, this place reeked of cheap cigarettes, sour beer, and a thumping bass that vibrated in my chest. I pulled my hat down low and hunched inside my large coat, trying to be invisible. My eyes scanned the room for a girl named Sarah, Chloe's former roommate. I found her huddled in a dark corner near the fire exit, nervously fiddling with a glass of water. The young woman's face was gaunt, her eyes dark-ringed with fear, like a terrified bird that had just escaped a predator. When I introduced myself as Chloe's cousin, Sarah jumped, nearly knocking over her glass. Her eyes darted around suspiciously before she gave a shaky nod for me to sit. "Don't believe what they're saying online," Sarah whispered, her voice cracking with emotion. Chloe wasn't a homewrecker. She wasn't some girl who'd sleep around for money. She was in trouble, backed into a corner, Sarah explained, her voice choked with grief and anger. Chloe was a good kid, but her mother back home was seriously ill and needed money for surgery. Desperate, Chloe fell into the trap of a predatory loan app. It started with a small $500 loan for hospital bills, but with exorbitant interest rates, the debt ballooned to $50,000 in just 3 months. The loan sharks began a campaign of terror. They photoshopped her picture onto pornographic images, called and threatened her family, and finally forced her to entertain clients to pay off the debt. The real person behind that app was a shell corporation owned by Marcus, Sarah revealed, a truth that sent a chill down my spine. He used the debt to turn her into his slave. He made her do disgusting things, entertain his perverted business partners, and even forced her to set a trap for David. I clenched my fists under the table, my nails digging into my palms. So Chloe's tragedy stemmed from the cruelty of my own brother-in-law. He wasn't just a smuggler and money launderer. He profited from the desperation of poor young women. David found out, Sarah sobbed, wiping her tears. He didn't blame Chloe. He secretly started helping her pay off the principal debt. He wanted to get her out of that mess. He told her to save all the evidence, the threatening texts, the money transfer records so they could expose Marcus's operation. The day it happened, she told me David was meeting her at the mansion to get the last piece of evidence and help her disappear. Sarah's story was the final piece of the puzzle. They weren't adulterous lovers who died in pleasure. They were 2 people desperately trying to escape a monster. David, the husband I had recently resented for his distance, had been fighting a lonely war in secret to protect justice, to protect his family, and maybe to protect me from being tainted by his family's dirty money. "Ma'am," Sarah said, suddenly grabbing my hand. It was cold and trembling. Chloe knew she was playing with fire. She left something behind. She told me if anything happened to her, I had to find a way to get this to you. She said only you could clear her name. I looked into Sarah's haunted eyes, feeling the weight of the trust this young woman was placing in me. In this city of deceit and danger, the goodness and sacrifice of people like Chloe and David shone like stars in the darkness, illuminating my own bleeding heart. Sarah glanced around one more time, then pulled a small object, wrapped in multiple layers of plastic, from the sole of her worn-out sneaker. She quickly pressed it into my hand. It was a small, black USB drive, its paint chipped, looking far too old and insignificant to hold world-shattering secrets. Chloe said this has copies of Marcus's text messages, a list of all the girls he trapped, and some audio she secretly recorded when she was forced to meet his clients, Sarah whispered, her voice shaking, but her eyes resolute. She said David told her that if they didn't make it back, I had to find you. He left a message for you, but he didn't dare text it directly, afraid your phone was bugged. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clutched the USB drive. What did he say? He said, "Find our silent friend. You understand Bones best." Sarah repeated the words carefully, as if reciting a sacred code. I don't know what it means, but he said you would. Our silent friend understands Bones best. The words echoed in my head like a bell, awakening a dormant memory. I knew what he meant. Tears welled in my eyes. Even in his final moments, David was thinking of me, trusting in the deep understanding between us. To pass on the most critical clue, he didn't choose a lawyer or the police. He chose me, his medical examiner wife. It was a testament of absolute trust, and a burden of 1,000 pounds he was forced to place on my shoulders. "Thank you," I said, squeezing Sarah's hand. "Go back home. Get out of this city. Change your number. Delete your social media. I promise you, Chloe's sacrifice will not be in vain." Leaving the bar, I hailed a cab. I didn't go straight home but had the driver take a winding route through the city to shake any potential tales. The USB in my pocket felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. I knew what I was holding wasn't just evidence. It was the blood, tears, and lives of good people crushed by money and power. My phone rang. It was Eleanor, my mother-in-law. A call from her at this hour was definitely not a wellness check. I took a deep breath, smoothed my hair, and composed myself before answering. "Hello, Eleanor. Evelyn, get to the estate. Now, I have important matters to discuss with you regarding David's assets." Eleanor's voice was imperious and calculating. "Don't keep me waiting. The corporate lawyers are here." I hung up. They were making their move. Now that David was cremated and the crime scene cleaned, it was time to deal with the meddlesome widow and tie up all loose ends. I tightened my grip on the USB drive. Fine. If they wanted to play hardball, I would show them that this daughter-in-law was no lamb to the slaughter. The heavy iron gates of the Reed estate swung open, swallowing my small cab into the vast, manicured grounds. The stately family home, a mix of old-world brick and modern glass, exuded an air of solemn authority, but also the oppressive weight of a powerful dynasty. I entered the grand living room, where ornate antique furniture seemed to want to devour anyone who sat on it. Eleanor was seated in the main armchair, her fingers tracing a string of sandalwood beads, her eyes half closed. But behind that meditative facade, I knew a sharp mind was calculating every move to protect the family's interests. Marcus wasn't there. It was just her and a middle-aged lawyer in thick glasses who had a stack of documents laid out on the table. "Sit," Eleanor said, her eyes fluttering open. Her voice was soft but as cold as a winter wind. She gestured to the chair opposite her, where a cup of steaming tea and a bank check were already waiting. I glanced at the check. The number, written in neat script, was followed by a staggering number of zeros. $5 million. Enough to buy a penthouse. Enough for a normal person to live in luxury for the rest of their life without working. Beside the check was a one-way business-class ticket to Vancouver, departing the next evening. "This is your inheritance," Eleanor stated, her tone flat. $5 million, plus the condo in Vancouver that David bought. I'm transferring the title to you. In return, you will sign here." The lawyer pushed the folder toward me. It was a non-disclosure agreement, waiving all rights to further inheritance, company shares, and most importantly, committing to absolute secrecy regarding David's death. A clause explicitly stated that the signatory acknowledged David's death as an accident and would not disclose any information, photos, or suspicions to any third party. The penalty for violation was 10 times the received amount and full legal liability. I picked up the contract, pretending to skim it, but I was actually activating the pen recorder hidden in my breast pocket. "Eleanor, are you trying to send me away?" I asked, my voice trembling, feigning the weak, greedy persona she expected. "But David, he died so unjustly." "Unjustly?" Eleanor slammed her hand on the table, making the teacup rattle. "He died because of his own debauchery, on top of another woman. What's unjust about that? Do you want the whole world to know your husband was a drug-addicted degenerate? Do you want this corporation to collapse and put thousands of people out of work? Is that what you want?" She rose and walked toward me, her face inches from mine. The smell of her perfume was so strong it made me nauseous. "Evelyn, you're a smart woman. The dead are dead. It's the living who matter. Take the money, go abroad, live a comfortable life, find another husband, have children. Don't be foolish enough to fight a battle you can't win. The family is more important than the life of one person. Do you understand? The family is more important than a life." The words stabbed me in the heart. She had admitted it. To her, her son's life was worth less than their hollow reputation and their mountain of assets. She was willing to use money to silence me, to whitewash her murderous older son, and to bury her younger son under a mountain of shame. I lowered my head to hide the hatred in my eyes, my hand shaking as I picked up the pen. I understand. I'll sign. I'll leave." I scrawled my name on the contract that sold my soul. Eleanor watched me, a satisfied smirk on her face. She thought money could solve everything, that I, like so many others, would be blinded by the millions. She didn't know I was accepting the money not to stay silent, but as further proof of the cold-blooded cruelty of this so-called noble family. I walked out of the estate with the check in hand, my heart heavy but my will forged in iron. Back at our old condo, the first place we lived together before moving to the mansion, a profound emptiness greeted me. Everything was as we had left it. David's half-finished mug of coffee on the table, his slippers by the door. But his warmth was gone forever. I locked the door, drew the blinds, and went straight to the study. In the corner, standing silently in the shadows, was the silent friend David had mentioned. It was a life-sized, medical-grade anatomical skeleton, a gift from him on our 3rd anniversary. He had joked, "You love your job more than you love me, so I got you this." Whenever you miss work, you can just look at him instead of thinking about the corpses at the morgue. I had laughed and called him ridiculous, but I cherished his understanding and respect for my career. I stood before the skeleton, my hand stroking its smooth, cold skull. "Understands bones," I murmured his words. As a medical examiner, I knew the structure of every vertebra, every joint. I remembered David once asking me about the spine, listening intently as I explained the flexibility of the cervical vertebrae and the stability of the thoracic vertebrae. A strange light had shone in his eyes then. I took a deep breath and placed my fingers on the 3rd cervical vertebra, C3, and the 5th thoracic vertebra, T5. Anatomically unrelated, but they were the numbers of our birthdays, March and the 5th. I pressed both thumbs firmly on the spinous processes of these 2 vertebrae simultaneously. Click. A small mechanical sound came from inside the plastic skull. The top of the skull, which had been securely attached, popped open slightly, revealing a small gap. My heart leaped. I lifted the skull cap. Taped inside the hollow cavity was a small red SD card and a letter, folded into a tiny square. I picked up the letter. David's familiar handwriting, slightly shaky, filled the page. "My dearest Eve, if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you. Don't cry. Your hero is just on a long assignment. I discovered that Marcus is using the company's shipping fleet to transport illegal electronics and synthetic drugs. I couldn't stand by and let our family's legacy be tarnished. I was gathering evidence to expose him, but I was afraid I wouldn't have enough time. This SD card contains the real, unedited ledgers of the corporation. It's the only proof, and it's the life insurance I'm leaving for you. Use it to protect yourself and to do what's right. I'm sorry to leave you with this burden. I love you more than life itself." I clutched the letter to my chest and sank to the floor, sobbing. The tears I had held back for so long finally broke free. "You fool! Did you think you were a superhero? Why didn't you tell me?" But I knew why. He was protecting me. I wiped my tears and inserted the SD card into my laptop. Thousands of files appeared. Shipping manifests, drop-off schedules for illicit goods, lists of bribed officials, and audio recordings of Marcus's calls with foreign partners. This was the nuclear bomb that could obliterate my in-laws' filthy empire. I held the card tightly. "You gave your life for this truth, David. I won't let it be buried. This war is just beginning." The old, air-gapped laptop I used exclusively for forensic data whirred to life. The screen cast a cold blue glow in the dark room, reflecting my gaunt face and shadowed eyes. I held my breath and clicked on the only folder on the red SD card, Project Blue Ocean. The name sounded so poetic, so humanitarian, just like the polished facade the Reed Corporation presented to the world. But as the dense Excel files opened, a horrifying truth danced before my eyes. These weren't containers of textiles or agricultural exports as claimed in their annual reports. The shipping orders were coded, but with the decryption key David had carefully left in an attached text file, I saw them for what they were: illegal electronics, hazardous waste, and precursor chemicals for methamphetamine. A chemical with the street name Blue Ice, a key component for making crystal meth, was being smuggled in disguised as industrial cleaning solvent for the ships. The quantities weren't in grams, but in tons. The profit columns were filled with an endless string of zeros, billions of dollars in dirty money, laundered through a network of offshore shell companies and funneled back into Marcus's private accounts as project investments. Every ship that docked was a ghost ship, carrying death and environmental ruin, yet earning him accolades as a leading entrepreneur. My chest tightened, not just at Marcus's cruelty, but at the thought of what David must have gone through, living with this terrible secret, fighting a lonely battle in the dark, only to pay the ultimate price. Click. A strange noise from the stairwell shattered the silence. My senses went on high alert. Footsteps. Not the light tread of a neighbor, but the heavy, deliberate thud of hard-soled shoes, making no attempt at stealth. Then, the jangling of metal, the unmistakable sound of lock-picking tools. They had found me, much faster than I'd anticipated. Marcus must have had me followed from the estate. He never trusted me, and he never intended for me to walk away alive with his family's secrets. I yanked the SD card out and tucked it, along with David's letter, deep inside my bra. I looked around for a weapon, nothing but heavy medical textbooks and the silent skeleton. Crash! The apartment door shuddered under a heavy blow. The sound of splintering wood was deafening. I backed toward the window, grabbing a box cutter from the desk. I extended the flimsy blade, my hand shaking. I knew I couldn't fight professional thugs, but I would rather die than let them take the evidence that would clear my husband's name. The headlights of a car parked below cast dancing shadows on the ceiling. The night was about to turn bloody. The door finally gave way, crashing inward. 3 large men in black, their faces covered by masks, stormed in like predators. The leader had a long scar running from his eye to his chin. His cold eyes scanned the room and locked onto me. "Give us the card, and I'll make it quick," he growled, advancing slowly, a metal baseball bat in his hand. "Don't come any closer," I shouted, my voice cracking. "I'm live streaming. There are hidden cameras everywhere. One scream from me, and your faces will be all over the internet." I pointed to a small, flashing red light on the ceiling, the low battery indicator on a smoke detector, but in the dim light, it was enough to make them pause. Their hesitation was my only chance. "She's bluffing! Get her!" the scarred man yelled, lunging. I didn't wait. I turned and sprinted onto the balcony. The night air was a cold shock. I was on the 2nd floor. Below was a thick bougainvillea bush and a pile of discarded junk. The fall wouldn't kill me, but it could easily break bones. But there was no other way out. I gripped the rusty iron railing, closed my eyes, and jumped. I crashed through the branches, sharp thorns tearing at my skin and clothes. I landed in a roll, a survival instinct kicking in, but a sharp pain shot up my ankle. I bit my lip to stifle a scream and scrambled to my feet. Blood was trickling down my arm, but I didn't feel it. Adrenaline surged through me. I had to run. "She jumped! Get down there!" a voice shouted from above. I limped to my car, fumbling for the keys. The engine roared to life just as the scarred man landed on the ground. He swung the bat, shattering my side mirror. I floored the accelerator, the car lurching forward into the night, leaving their curses behind me. I drove blindly, tears and blood mixing on my lips. My home, the last sanctuary of my memories with David, had been violated. From this moment on, I was no longer Dr. Evelyn Reed, respected medical examiner. I was a fugitive, the hunted, but also a warrior holding the weapon that would destroy my enemy. I woke to the harsh glare of noon sun piercing through holes in a corrugated metal roof. My entire body ached. I was in an old, abandoned medical supply warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a property a friend had left in my care. The air was thick with the smell of moldy cardboard and antiseptic, but to me, it was the safest place on earth. My injuries were mostly cuts and bruises. My ankle was swollen but not broken. For 2 days, I lived like a ghost, eating dry ramen and drinking bottled water. I disconnected from the world and immersed myself in the data on the SD card, mapping out timelines, locations, and money flows on the back of old boxes. I discovered a pattern. Marcus always hosted a lavish charity event or party on the same day a major shipment arrived, creating a perfect distraction. And tomorrow night, the corporation was hosting its annual CEO Appreciation Gala at the city's most luxurious hotel. It was also the night the year's largest shipment of blue ice was due to arrive. He thought I was hiding like a cornered rat. He was wrong. I wasn't going to run anymore. I was going to walk right up to him, under the brightest lights, in the most dangerous place. I sent a text to Marcus's personal number from a burner phone. Dearest brother-in-law, I'll be at the gala tomorrow. I'm bringing a gift to thank you for the 5 million. Do be a good host. I snapped the SIM card and tossed it. I looked at my reflection in a broken mirror. My face was gaunt, my hair a mess, but my eyes burned with hatred. I took the only piece of makeup I had, a tube of dark red lipstick, and painted my pale lips. The color was like blood, a declaration of war. Tomorrow, the weak woman named Evelyn would die. In her place, a goddess of vengeance would rise from the ashes to claim justice. The grand ballroom of the hotel was a sea of sparkling crystal chandeliers and the soft strains of classical music. Men in tuxedos mingled with women in glittering evening gowns, the air thick with expensive perfume and false laughter. I made my entrance not as a tattered fugitive, but in a floor-length black velvet gown with a daringly high slit that revealed a few flesh-toned bandages on my leg. Black for mourning, but also for power and mystery. My appearance was like a drop of ink in a crystal-clear glass. A hush fell over the room. Whispers followed me. Isn't that David Reed's widow? Her husband just died, and she's already out partying? I held my head high and walked straight to the head table where Marcus sat, a glass of wine in his hand. The smile on his face froze when he saw me. Evelyn. What a surprise, he said, standing, his voice tight. I thought you'd be traveling. I missed my family too much. I replied with a cold smile that didn't reach my eyes, pulling out a chair directly opposite him. The waiter brought out the main course, lobster thermidor. The massive red crustacean lay on a silver platter, its claws raised defiantly. Marcus picked up his utensils, but his hand trembled slightly. Marcus, I said, my voice soft but carrying across the now silent table as I picked up my own silver knife. Do you know the best way to kill a lobster so the meat stays sweet? He frowned. What are you talking about? I ignored him, pressing the tip of my knife into the joint between the lobster's head and body. They say you should drive the point directly into the nerve cluster here. One swift motion. The animal is instantly paralyzed. It can't struggle, can't make a sound. But its heart keeps beating for a few more minutes. It dies fully aware, feeling the blade separate its flesh from its shell. A very clean death. Almost like falling asleep. The color drained from Marcus's face. He understood. He saw not the lobster, but his brother. He saw the needle, the paralysis, the conscious terror. Eat up, brother-in-law, I said, cutting a piece of lobster and bringing it to my lips, my eyes locked on his. Don't let it get cold. It's like a blood debt. If you let it sit too long, the stench becomes impossible to hide. The table was frozen. Marcus gripped the arms of his chair, knowing I hadn't come for dinner. I had come to deliver his sentence. The tension at the table was thick enough to cut with a knife. Marcus stared at me, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool air. I slowly opened my small, glittering clutch and took out the old black USB drive, the one Sarah had given me. I placed it on the edge of the glass, Lazy Susan, right next to my half-eaten lobster. It looked so out of place, yet so powerful. I gave the Lazy Susan a gentle push. It rotated slowly, carrying the drive toward Marcus. He watched it like it was a venomous snake, his eyes a mixture of greed and terror. As it reached him, his hand shot out to grab it, but I was faster, stopping the glass with my own hand. Not so fast, Marcus, I said, my voice low. This is just a copy. The original, along with the entire Project Blue Ocean database, is on a secure server with a dead man's switch. If I don't return home tonight, or if I have any accidents, like my husband did, the entire package will be sent to the FBI and the top 10 newspapers in the country at 8 a.m. sharp. His hand froze in midair. He clenched his fist, his voice a low growl. What do you want? Money? I can give you double, triple. Just give me the original and get out of this country. I looked at him with utter contempt. I don't want your money, I said, leaning forward. I want the real passenger manifest for that flight to London. And more importantly, I want to know where the man who impersonated my husband at the airport is hiding. You give me those two things, and I might consider keeping your dirty little secrets for a few more days. He was stunned. He knew his perfect murder plot had been unraveled. He tried to recover, a twisted, dangerous smile forming. Evelyn, you know, being too smart isn't good for your health. "We'll see about my health," I said, standing and retrieving the USB drive. "But I can guarantee you that your chairmanship will be shattered long before I die. You have one night to think about it." I turned and walked away, the sound of my heels clicking decisively on the marble floor. Behind me, Marcus sat alone at his lavish table, a trapped animal. He knew the prey had become the hunter. That night, my burner phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, 10 p.m. tomorrow. My penthouse, Riverside Drive. Come alone, bring the original, and you'll get what you want. Marcus was still arrogant. He chose his own fortress, a penthouse with private elevators and state-of-the-art security. He thought he could trap me there. He didn't realize his overconfidence would be his undoing. It was a trap, but I had to go. I suspected that penthouse was the primary crime scene. The next evening, I stood before the glittering skyscraper. My weapon wasn't a gun, but the tools of my trade: a vial of luminol, a powerful UV flashlight, and sterile evidence bags. I took a deep breath and stepped into the private elevator, ascending to the top floor, where the truth was hidden beneath a veneer of luxury. The elevator opened directly into a breathtakingly opulent living room. Marcus was sitting on a leather sofa, swirling a glass of red wine. "Right on time," he said with a smirk. "I was beginning to think you'd lost your nerve." "I'm here for what you promised," I said, my eyes scanning the room. The centerpiece was a massive, deep red Persian rug, perfect for hiding stains. "Relax. Have a drink first," he said, turning his back to me at the bar. That was my moment. I quickly sprayed a large amount of luminol onto the center of the rug. "I don't drink," I said loudly, distracting him as I pulled out the UV light. As he turned back, I hit the main light switch, plunging the room into darkness. "What the hell are you doing?" he yelled. I switched on the UV light and aimed it at the floor. A horrifying sight emerged. Glowing an eerie blue under the light was a massive, sprawling stain on the expensive rug, with drag marks leading toward the elevator. It was the chemical reaction of luminol with the iron and hemoglobin. Blood. A lot of blood. "What is this, Marcus?" My voice trembled with rage. "You said it was an accident. Whose blood is this? You beat him here, didn't you? You injected him right on this rug." The truth, invisible moments before, was now blazing in the dark. Marcus's panic quickly turned to fury. "You bitch! You set me up!" he roared, lunging at me. I dodged, backing away as he stumbled in the dark. As he got close, I pulled out a can of pepper spray and unleashed it directly in his face. He screamed in agony, clutching his eyes. "I'll kill you!" he bellowed. I used the opportunity to kneel, rip a small sample of the blood-soaked carpet fiber, and shove it into an evidence bag. But he was faster than I thought. Blinded but enraged, he swung wildly, and his arm connected with my shoulder, sending me flying into a wall. The UV light skittered across the floor. He heard me fall and lunged, grabbing my ankle. I kicked out with my other foot, smashing my heel into his nose. He grunted, his grip loosening for a second. I scrambled up, grabbed a heavy ceramic vase, and brought it down on his head with all my might. It shattered. He groaned and collapsed. I didn't wait to see if he was dead or alive. I sprinted for the elevator, jamming the buttons. As the doors slid shut, I saw him struggling to his feet, his face a mask of blood and rage, his bloody hand slamming against the closing doors. It was too late. I had escaped, and I had the evidence that would send him to his grave. I drove straight to the Homicide Division headquarters and found Detective Miller. I placed the evidence bag with the bloody carpet fibers and the USB drive on his desk. "Here is your evidence," I said. "My husband's blood from Marcus's apartment and the entire file on his smuggling operation. I'm betting my life on your integrity, Detective." Miller looked at the evidence, then at me. After a long silence, he locked his office door. "Dr. Reed," he said, his voice grim, "we've been waiting for a day like this. We've been investigating Marcus for 2 years, but he's slippery and well protected. We needed one piece of direct evidence to get a warrant. This is it." "Is it enough?" I asked. "It's enough to bring him in for assault," he said, "but to take down his empire, we need to catch him in the act. According to our intel, a big shipment is coming in tomorrow night. After tonight, he'll be spooked. He'll try to move the goods immediately. We're going to use that. Their plan was to leak false information that federal agents were raiding the port in 2 days. Combined with my continued threats, the pressure would force Marcus to personally oversee the moving of his illicit cargo that very night. It was a high-risk gamble, but it targeted his 2 greatest weaknesses: greed and fear. The wind howled across the stacks of shipping containers at the port. From a police surveillance van, I watched as a convoy of black SUVs pulled up to a warehouse. Marcus got out, looking frantic, yelling at his men to load crates onto waiting trucks. "He's here," Miller whispered, watching through night vision binoculars. The tactical team was in position, waiting for the signal. They waited until the trucks were almost fully loaded with drugs and dirty money, ensuring the evidence was irrefutable. "It's time, Dr. Reed," Miller nodded to me. I took out the burner phone and typed one last message. "Marcus, lovely night for a sea breeze, isn't it? The police will be there in 3 minutes. I wonder, did I send them your location, or did I send it to you?" I hit send. Through the monitor, I saw him read the text. He froze, his face a mask of pure terror. "It's a setup! Get out! Move!" he screamed, dropping his phone and running for his SUV, abandoning his men. "Move in!" Miller commanded. Instantly, floodlights illuminated the entire area. Sirens blared. "NYPD! Drop your weapons!" a voice boomed over a loudspeaker. Tactical officers swarmed from the shadows. Marcus's crew scattered but were quickly apprehended. In a final, desperate act, Marcus grabbed a nearby dock worker, pulled a gun, and held it to the man's head. "Stay back, or I'll blow his brains out," he shrieked, dragging the terrified hostage toward the edge of the pier. "Get me a car, a full tank of gas, no tail." The standoff was tense, a deadly stalemate. He needed a psychological shock, a distraction. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the van, walking into the harsh glare of the floodlights. "Marcus!" I called out, my voice clear and steady over the wind. He whipped around, his eyes wide with disbelief. You dare show your face here? Why shouldn't I?" I walked closer, staring down the barrel of his gun. "You killed my husband. You tried to kill me. But I'm still standing. I'm here to watch your world burn." "Shut up! It's all your fault!" he screamed, his rage overriding his tactical sense. He shifted the gun from the hostage's temple and aimed it directly at me. Crack! A single, sharp rifle shot echoed from the rooftop of a nearby container. The sniper's bullet hit Marcus squarely in his right shoulder. He screamed, the gun clattering from his grasp and splashing into the dark water below. He collapsed, clutching his bleeding arm as officers swarmed him. The click of handcuffs was the final, definitive sound. I watched the once powerful man being pinned to the grimy concrete and felt not triumph, but a profound, empty sadness. Justice had been served, but at a cost that could never be repaid. In the cold interrogation room, Marcus sat silently, his bravado gone. His high-powered lawyer arrived, presenting a thick file to Miller. "My client has a documented history of paranoid schizophrenia," the lawyer announced smugly. "His actions were the result of a psychotic break. We are requesting an immediate psychiatric hold, not a criminal trial." It was the classic get-out-of-jail-free card for the rich and powerful. Miller's face darkened as he saw the perfectly forged documents. I knew this trick, but they had chosen the wrong opponent. "Let me in there," I told Miller. "I'm family. I have the right to speak to him. I can break him." I walked into the room and sat opposite Marcus. He began his act, muttering nonsense, his eyes vacant. I said nothing, just laid out the photos one by one. The needle mark behind David's ear, the livor mortis on his back, the glowing blue bloodstain on the rug. "You're a good actor, Marcus," I said softly. "But do you know what it feels like to be injected with succinylcholine? First, your eyelids get heavy, then your tongue goes numb. Then your entire body turns to stone. But your mind is perfectly clear. David heard every word you said. He felt everything you did to him. He suffocated, fully awake. "Shut up! I told you to shut up!" he suddenly screamed, clamping his hands over his ears, his act shattering. "You didn't mean to kill him at first, did you?" I pressed on. You just wanted to scare him into giving you the SD card. But you miscalculated the dose, or maybe you just let him die while you were busy staging the scene. You're a murderer, Marcus, but you're also a coward. I didn't kill him, he roared, slamming his fists on the table, spit flying from his mouth. I just wanted him to listen. I calculated the dose. He was just too weak. It wasn't my fault. The confession hung in the air. Outside the one-way mirror, the detectives recorded every word. Marcus froze, realizing he had just tied the noose around his own neck. The trial was a media circus. Marcus's lawyer put on a grand performance, pleading insanity. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the stand, calm and composed. Your Honor, I began, my voice ringing with clarity. The defense claims the defendant has been on antipsychotic medication for 3 years. I would like to present the results of a blood toxicology screen taken from Mr. Reed on the night of his arrest. I held up the report. There is no trace of olanzapine or risperidone in his system. Instead, we found high levels of amphetamines, a stimulant that would allow him to meticulously plan a murder and run a drug empire with perfect clarity. He is not insane, Your Honor. He is just pathologically greedy. My testimony, grounded in science, demolished his defense. After hours of deliberation, the verdict came. For the crimes of murder and drug trafficking, with aggravating circumstances, Marcus Reed was sentenced to death. The judge's gavel fell like a guillotine, ending the tragedy of a family rotten from the inside. A month later, on David's birthday, I received a scheduled email. The subject line was just 2 words, "To my wife." It was a short video he had recorded before his trip. He was smiling at his desk, the warm, loving smile I missed so dearly. "Hey, Eve," his voice filled the quiet room. "If you're watching this, it means I failed. Don't cry. I don't regret what I did. I only regret that I can't walk the rest of the way with you. Don't let what happened make you hate the world. In my copy of 100 Years of Solitude, I've tucked away a savings bond. It's clean money, money I earned myself. Use it to be free. Live a happy life, for both of us. I'll love you forever." 3 years later, I stood at a lectern at Columbia University. I no longer worked in a morgue. I was a professor, teaching the next generation. The morning sun streamed through the window, illuminating the faces of my students. "Remember," I told them, my voice steady and sure, "a surgeon's scalpel saves the living. A medical examiner's scalpel delivers justice for the dead. Our work is with the cold, but our hearts must always burn with a passion for the truth. Never let your blade be dulled by money or power." A wave of applause filled the lecture hall. I smiled, looking out at the bright blue sky. The past was at rest, the pain had become strength, and I knew, somewhere far away, David was smiling too.